It was a big day for 26-year-old reporter Alyssa Grace, one of the youngest rising stars at a major news network. She had been selected to interview the President of the United States, Donald J. Trump, live in studio. While her colleagues celebrated, Alyssa felt a weight pressing on her chest. Not nerves, something deeper. Behind her polished demeanor, Alyssa carried a painful secret. Her father, once a decorated Navy officer, had gone missing during a covert mission over a decade ago. No body was ever recovered, and the case was buried in classified silence. Ever since, Alyssa avoided discussing her father, especially in public. As she prepared for the interview, she promised herself she'd remain professional, composed, and ask only the questions she'd carefully rehearsed. No surprises. Trump's team had approved the segment, and the studio was packed with producers, journalists, and a live audience. Everyone expected tough, but respectful journalism. No one expected what was about to unfold. The red on-air light flicked on. Trump entered the studio to loud applause. Alyssa smiled professionally, shook his hand, and gestured for him to sit. The first few questions were routine. Economic progress, foreign relations, and national security. Trump responded with confidence, occasionally glancing around the studio as if searching for something or someone. Then, halfway through the interview, as Alyssa prepared to move to the next segment, Trump leaned forward. "I know you're supposed to ask the questions," he said, voice steady. "But may I ask you something, Miss Grace?" Alyssa blinked, caught off guard. "Of course," Mr. President Trump studied her carefully. "What was your father's name?" Silence dropped like a curtain. The crew froze. Alyssa's face palled. For the first time, the poised reporter looked uncertain. Alyssa took a breath. "Commander James Grace," she replied quietly. Trump nodded slowly. "Your father served in the Navy, didn't he?" "Yes," she whispered. Her voice cracked ever so slightly. "What happened to him?" he asked gently. Not like a politician, but like a concerned man. Her lip trembled. "He disappeared. In 2011, his mission was classified. We never got answers." The studio was dead silent. Even the floor manager, known for whispering cues, was still. "I'm sorry," Trump said, his tone softened. "I asked because his name came up in a file I reviewed recently, and I recognized your last name during briefing prep." Alyssa's heart pounded. She couldn't speak. Trump leaned closer. "Would you like to know what I found?" She nodded, eyes misting. For the first time, the interview wasn't about ratings. It was about something far more human. Trump explained. 3 weeks ago, during a routine review of unsolved military cases, I asked for a report on classified Navy operations that never had closure. One of my military aides handed me a weathered box. It had your father's name on it." Alyssa's hands trembled on her lap. "It had photos, letters, and a personal note addressed to you. It was never delivered. It got lost in red tape." The camera zoomed in on Alyssa's stunned face. Trump continued. "I've brought it with me today. I didn't plan to do this on air, but after seeing your name, I couldn't stay silent." He pulled out a small sealed envelope with a Navy crest and the name Alyssa Grace in faded ink. Tears welled in her eyes. In one moment, politics vanished. It was just a daughter and a lost piece of her father. Alyssa reached out slowly, hands shaking as Trump handed her the envelope. She stared at the familiar handwriting. "This can't be real," she murmured. "It is," Trump said. "Take your time. Open it if you wish, or wait." The cameras kept rolling, but no one made a sound. She opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter yellowed with time. She read aloud, voice breaking. "My dearest Alyssa, if you're reading this, I couldn't make it home. I want you to know how proud I am of you. Keep chasing truth, even when it's hard. I believe in you, loved Dad." Her hands covered her face. Tears streamed down. Trump sat in silence, allowing her the moment. The studio, filled with news veterans, held its collective breath. No segment had ever gone off script like this, and yet it was more powerful than anything they'd planned. After a deep breath, Alyssa looked up, her eyes meeting Trump's. How did you find this?" she asked, voice. "I didn't," Trump said honestly. A young Navy clerk named Samuel Brighton came across it and flagged it. He said, "This doesn't belong in a box. It belongs in her hands." Alyssa whispered the name. "I remember him. He used to visit our house when I was a kid. He was Dad's assistant." Trump nodded. "He told me your father was a mentor, and he never forgot your family." The studio was still live, but no one was watching the clock. The human moment was more valuable than any ad break. Alyssa whispered, "I always thought no one cared, that he was forgotten."
Trump leaned in.
He wasn't. Not by his men, not by me, and clearly not by you. The interview had shifted from a political event to a deeply personal revelation. Viewers across the country were glued to their screens. Social media buzzed, not with controversy, but with compassion. Alyssa wiped her tears and sat up straight. "Mr. President," she said softly, "I didn't expect this. I came here to ask about policy, not my past." Trump nodded. "Sometimes the past needs to be honored before we talk about the future." He turned toward the camera. "There are thousands of families like Alyssa's, waiting, hoping, forgotten by bureaucracy. That's not right." A tear slid down Alyssa's cheek again, but this time it carried something new.
Peace.
The show producers signaled they had already passed the live window, but they let it roll. Some things are bigger than airtime. As the segment ended, the room erupted, not in applause, but in reverent silence. A few people quietly clapped, but most were wiping tears from their eyes. The moment had touched everyone, cameramen, directors, even cynical journalists. After the broadcast ended, one crew member approached Alyssa. "That letter reminded me of my grandfather. I never got to say goodbye." Alyssa nodded, hugging the envelope to her chest.
"Me neither until now."
Trump stayed a few minutes longer, thanking the team and quietly speaking with the staff. He shook hands with every person, even those behind the cameras. Then he turned to Alyssa. "If you'd like, we can help you get access to more of your father's records." She looked at him stunned. "You do that?" He nodded. "It's the least we can do." That night, Alyssa sat alone with the letter. Her apartment was quiet, save for the hum of the city beyond her window. She remembered the last day she saw her father. She was 15. He had hugged her tightly, whispered a promise. "I'll be back, kiddo. Keep writing those poems." She never told anyone about the journal she kept. Her dad was the only one who knew. She opened a drawer and pulled it out, her old navy blue journal. The pages yellowed and faded. Inside was a dried flower from the day he left. And now, next to it, she placed the letter. For the first time in over a decade, her heart felt full. The next morning, Alyssa received a call from the White House. A polite assistant informed her that President Trump had personally instructed a team to assist her in accessing all available files regarding Commander James Grace. "You'll receive a clearance pass. We've scheduled a private briefing in 3 days," the assistant added. Alyssa was speechless.
"Thank you.
This means more than you know." The assistant smiled through the phone. "The president believes your story could help others." After the call ended, Alyssa stared at the photo of her father on her bookshelf. "I'm going to find out everything, Dad," she whispered. "Even if it's hard." It was no longer just about grief. It was about honoring the legacy of a man who'd silently shaped her values and her voice. Alyssa spent the next few days reviewing old letters, medals, and voice recordings her father had left behind. The pain returned, but this time it wasn't sharp. It was cleansing. She also began journaling again for the first time in years. Her pen flew across the pages, pouring thoughts that had stayed buried for too long. Then came the big day. She wore a navy blue suit, her father's favorite color, and pinned one of his medals inside her pocket close to her heart. As she stood outside the government building where she'd received the classified briefing, a thought occurred to her. What if she wasn't ready for the truth? But then she remembered his words. Keep chasing truth, even when it's hard. She stepped inside. The meeting room was small and secure. A colonel named Marissa Clark greeted her with a soft smile and handed her a folder. Inside were reports, transcripts, maps, and a redacted statement from someone known only as Subject K. Alyssa asked the colonel, "Did my father die in combat?" Colonel Clark paused. Your father's mission was compromised, but he wasn't confirmed dead. He was listed as MIA, missing in action, but not conclusively. Alyssa blinked. Are you saying there's a chance he's alive? Clark hesitated. Let's just say we believe he survived the initial ambush. After that, we lost the trail. Alyssa's hands trembled. For the first time in years, there was a whisper of hope. That evening, Alyssa sat by the Toic River, folder in her lap, eyes scanning every page. The journalist in her wanted to publish it all, expose the broken system, ask why families like hers were left in the dark. But the daughter in her knew this wasn't just a story. This was her father's life, his legacy. She wrestled with the decision all night. Then she made a promise. I will tell this story, but not as a scandal. I'll tell it as a tribute. And just like that, her purpose became clear. It wasn't about headlines. It was about healing for her and for others like her. Back at the studio, Alyssa returned not just as a reporter, but as someone transformed. The producer hugged her tightly. You know, the whole country saw that moment. We've never had such a genuine segment go viral. Alyssa smiled. It wasn't a segment. It was real. Another reporter approached her. You gave voice to something a lot of us bury.
Thank you.
Later that day, the network asked if she'd be open to doing a special feature titled The Letter My Father Left Behind. Alyssa agreed, but she insisted on one condition. I want this to honor every missing or forgotten soldier, not just mine. The team nodded and the planning began. A few days later, Alyssa received an envelope at her apartment with the presidential seal. Inside was a handwritten note from Trump. Alyssa, your strength reminded the world what real patriotism looks like. Your father would be proud. Keep asking questions, especially the ones that matter. Sincerely, Donald J. Trump. Beneath the note was something else. A small American flag that had flown over the White House the day of their interview. It was folded with military precision. Alyssa clutched it, feeling her father's presence again. It wasn't about politics. It was about people and the weight of silent sacrifices finally being heard. The special report aired 1 week later. Alyssa narrated with honesty and grace. She shared her father's story, the unanswered questions, the pain of waiting, and the hope that remained. Clips from the Trump interview played the moment she read the letter on air, the silence, the emotion. At the end, she closed with a powerful message. If you have someone you've lost, speak their name. If you're still waiting for answers, don't stop asking, because sometimes closure doesn't come in reports or ceremonies. Sometimes it comes in a letter and a little bit of truth. The screen faded to black. Phones began to ring. Over the next few days, Alyssa received thousands of messages from viewers around the country. Veterans, children of missing soldiers, even people who hadn't spoken about their grief in years. One email read, "Your story gave me the courage to open my brother's final journal. I'd kept it sealed for 17 years. Another said, "My son died in Iraq. I thought no one remembered, but watching you made me feel seen." Alyssa read each one, crying quietly as she realized her father's story had become a bridge for so many others. Pain shared was no longer pain carried alone. Just when Alyssa thought she'd heard from everyone, she got a call from a block number. It was her father's old squad member's widow, Elena Carter. "I never told you," Elena said, voice shaking. "But your father saved my husband's life during their last mission. He carried him half a mile through enemy fire." Alyssa was stunned. "I never knew that he made sure others got out," Elena continued. "Your dad? He was the kind of man who died for others or lived for them." Either way, Alyssa's heart ached, but it also soared. Her father had been a hero. 6 months later, Alyssa stood at a small dedication ceremony at Arlington National Cemetery. President Trump was present again, quietly standing in the crowd. They were unveiling a new memorial for those who never came home, but were never forgotten. Alyssa was asked to speak. She stood tall, holding the same letter from her father. "I may never get to hug him again," she said, voice clear. "But he gave me something that lives forever. His values, his courage, and the reminder that every voice matters." The crowd stood in silence. A few saluted. Even Trump looked moved. That night, Alyssa sat in her apartment, watching the sun disappear behind the Washington skyline. The letter sat framed beside her father's old photo. A soft breeze drifted through the window, and she smiled to herself. What started as a formal interview became something much more. A moment that reconnected the past with the present, grief with purpose, and silence with voice. And all because someone asked a simple question. What was your father's name? A question that brought a studio to silence and a daughter back to life.